committee. House taxation will now come to order, please. First item of business today would be bill introductions. Representative Corbett.
It's 21 RS 0219. And just a quick overview. It basically just kind of gives businesses who have been shut down or limited to capacity the opportunity and a procedure to redeem and get some of their property tax money back from the county commission.
Thank you. Questions for Representative Corbett? Representative Helgerson.
Why are you only giving part of the money back and not all of it? Are you a liberal?
Dear Representative, it's prorated for as long as they're shut down. If you all keep them shut down forever, they can get all their property tax back.
Any further questions for Representative Corbett? Seeing none, is there any objection to the request for introduction? Seeing none, it is introduced. Thank you, Representative. Representative Clayton.
Thank you. I have a request for a bill introduction, please. It is to tax-exempt transportation projects from the tax lid. The RS number is RS 0515, and it's on behalf of the Governor's Council on Tax Reform.
Thank you, Representative. Committee, any questions? And just for clarification, those of you who are joining on Zoom, I would encourage you to please use your raise hand feature. I do have my laptop up in the committee room here, and I should be able to see you. If you click on your name, hover over that and click on the hand icon, it allows me to follow along with the virtual committee members a little bit easier. Seeing no questions, is there any objection to the introduction? Seeing none, thank you, Representative. Representative Gardner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I couldn't resist with my colleague, Representative Corbett, since he introduced a bill. So I'd like to introduce the Kansas Taxpayer Protection Act. It's RS 0590, and I'm introducing that on behalf of H&R Block.
Thank you, Representative Gardner. Committee, any questions? Seeing none, is there any objection to the introduction? Seeing none, it is introduced. Thank you. Do you have a second one? Okay.
Yes, I do, Mr.
So you're one up on Representative.
I wanted to be one up on Representative Corbett. It's the only time. This bill was introduced last year also, Mr. Chairman. It is increasing the standard deduction for the state of Kansas. It's RS 0441.
Thank you, Representative. Committee, questions?
Increasing it to what?
Representative Gardner.
I believe the bill, in its present form, for standard deduction for individuals goes from $3,500 to $4,000. Married filing jointly goes to $8,000, and the head of household to $6,000, if I remember correctly.
Yes, sir. And I apologize for not raising my hand.
That's okay. I didn't know if I just hadn't recognized you. Sometimes my vision doesn't go all the way out there, and I apologize. Committee, any further questions? Seeing none, any objection to the introduction of the bill? Seeing none, it is introduced. Thank you, Representative. Further introductions of bills? Chair would like to recognize Whitney Dameron.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, I'm Whitney Dameron, appearing on behalf of the Kansas Automobile Dealers Association. In 2018, the legislature passed the sales tax exemption on manufacturers' rebates on new vehicles sold and leased. That legislation had a 3-year sunset, which is expiring June 30th, 2021. That was the second time the legislature has passed that legislation with a 3-year sunset. We have legislation to remove the sunset altogether and make that exemption permanent, and that is in the form of 21 RS 0488. We'd appreciate the opportunity to have that bill introduced and heard. Thank you.
Thank you. Committee, any questions? Representative Baker.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So the discussion on these rebates is always, should we extend that to other industries too? So that'll be a discussion when we get ready to work that bill. Thank you.
Further questions, committee? I apologize. I will try to keep remembering to check my laptop too to see if there are any hands up. I do not see any. Any objection to the introduction? Seeing none, Mr. Dameron, thank you. Committee, any further requests for bill introductions? Seeing none, we will move on to our first item of business for the day. We have an informational briefing from David Harper, the Director of Property Valuation Division, and Roger Ham, Deputy Director. I believe I will introduce Director Harper first, and he will lead the discussion. So can you hear us, Director?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes, coming through loud and clear.
Very good. You have a couple old guys over here dealing with technology, so bear with us. Yeah, I thank you, and then I'm going to turn it over in just a minute to Deputy Director Ham for the presentation. But Mr. Chairman, just did want to take a minute and introduce myself to the new committee members. I'm David Harper, Director for Division of Property Valuation, and I think when Roger starts in his presentation and works through there, you're going to pick up very quickly that PVD has a lot of specialized duties that we perform, and we keep track and have a lot of data in our systems related to property valuations and property taxation. So we just have our contact information on Roger's first slide, and encourage you to reach out to us at any time if we can help you and provide some of that information throughout the session. So with that, if Mr. Ham is ready, I will turn it over to him and let him start working through his presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Director. And Roger, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear. I can hear you well.
Okay. Yes, we can hear you. Go ahead, sir.
All right. I'm going to share with my screen. Are you seeing that okay?
Yes, we can see that good. Thank you.
Okay, we'll get started in our presentation. We got several topics. I'm getting a feedback here. We're going to have several topics that we're going to be talking about. Kansas reappraisal system and the process that we're going to go through. The county appraiser and their responsibilities.
Did we lose you, Roger? Okay, Roger, if you can hear us, I think you're muted. We cannot hear any audio. We still have visual.
Mr. Chairman, Roger's having a little problem on his system, so he's going to slip in here at my desk and pick up on the presentation.
Okay, sorry about that. Not sure
Oh,
what the
that's your
bug
fault.
was, but we were pretty impressed with his disappearing act.
I do that quite often around here, being quite honest. What do we have for up on the screen? Anything? Let's see if we can.
Right now, we are seeing you.
Okay. And how do I get that to share with you guys?
There should be a button down at the bottom to share.
I'll get it here eventually.
And once you click on that, you should be able to select from which screen or which window on your computer to share.
Okay.
And there we go. We can see you.
Got it?
Yes.
Hey, we got a lot of topics to cover today. Chairman would like to have me go over some of the things that you see here. Going to talk about the Kansas reappraisal system, some of the processes we go through. We certainly want to talk about the Kansas appraiser's responsibilities and their qualifications. We're going to spattered through here, we're going to take a look at some of the trends that we have out there as well on the valuation in Kansas right now, and take a look at developing a mill levy and tax rate. And then we're going to talk about the effective tax rate. And this is really important for some of our smaller rural counties and some of the effective tax rates that we have out there right now. And so that's kind of the things we'll be looking at today. We'll are you make sure I'm up to speed with you. Are you guys seeing the ad valorem property tax screen right now?
Yes, we are on the slide for ad valorem property tax.
Number 3 there. Okay. Right now, we know that property tax is the largest single revenue source in Kansas. And so you can see the big numbers there. We are now at $39 billion of assessed value in the state of Kansas with 1.6 million parcels of property out there that we have to appraise on an annual basis, generating about $5 billion in tax revenues. What I need you to all help me with is many people do not understand that this is the main function of main source of revenue for our cities and counties. So many people think that the property tax that they pay goes to the state of Kansas and in a big black hole somewhere, never to be seen again. And so that's not true. Only 1.5 mills goes to the state. So that revenue source is for the things that many of our citizens expect. And so that's how we pay for those services that they need out there. The trend has continued to go up for our state assessed, or for our the assessed value statewide, and you can see that the growth trend that we've had in assessed value over the years. We'll see this again, but you can also see the red line represents the tax collected as we've gone through that same period of time. The Kansas Constitution is very clear about how we need to do this, and it says that the legislators are going to make sure that we have a uniform and equal system of valuation and rate of taxation. And you've done that. And so for value part, to make sure that it's a uniform and equal, we use the fair market value system in Kansas. Everything is to be valued at its fair market value. There's a couple exceptions for that, and we'll get into those later. And of course, for
a uniform rate, we have an assessment rate in Kansas, and that's embedded in the Constitution as well. So those are important to remember, but I highlight the importance of fair market value in our state. We need to continue to think about that. It's the big, important part of the whole property tax system in Kansas. We even have a definition what that looks like. And for you and I, if I'm going to paraphrase this, it's going to be when you and I come together to buy and sell a property, we both go away feeling good about the sale and purchase. And so that's kind of what a definition of fair market value looks like. And we have this in statute to help us understand what that might look like. The classification system we have, and here's the 7 subclasses of real property in Kansas. And you can see the rate that we have that's uniform and equal within each class. And so residential is 11.5, and we go all the way up to public utility that's 33%. You can see market value for all of those except ag land. So that's the exception for our real estate. 6 subclasses on personal property. And you can see that it mirrors, if you will, our residential or real estate, and 11.5% for our manufactured homes, all the way up to 33% for public utility as well. Commercial industrial machinery and equipment is the exception. It's not at market value. I kind of remember that. And it's going to be retail cost when new. And of course, it caps out at 20%. It's never going to be lower than 20% of its retail cost when new, using a 7-year depreciation system on that, those items. And so, and also remember that we have exempt that property. Anything acquired after June 30, 06 is going to be exempt from property tax purposes. So we've kind of drawn a line in the sand. Some is still taxable and some is not. I continue to talk about fair market value, but we begin to think about the process, and the county appraiser kicks that off. And so it's an annual appraisal cycle beginning January 1. It's a snapshot. January 1, here's the value, and that begins the process. And the taxpayer's notified on or before March 1st for real estate, May 1st for personal property. And fair market values is achieved by, and these are the approaches to value that every appraiser uses. They're the standard ones. These are the cost approach, the sales comparison approach, and the income approach to fair market value for each one of those. So some of these, they are statutorily required to consider them. Some may not be the right one for the right property, but at least you consider which one is the best one and the best fit for each property in Kansas. And of course, we've got a mass appraisal system. I mentioned that we have 1.6 million parcels. We've got about just a little over 1 million of residential parcels in Kansas, 325,000 of that's ag land. Then we've got another 66,000 or so that's exempt property, another 75,000 that's commercial property. So you can kind of see the makeup of what we have to value on an annual basis. So we have to rely on this system to develop models so that we can value this universe of properties. And so we're going to use this tool to determine the variables and coefficients necessary to come up with this consistent value that we need when we're valuing this fair market value for all our parcels in Kansas. 1992 was a significant year. Department of Revenue was sued. And one of the very good things that came out of that was that the legislature passed the Sales Ratio Study Act. And so it's now a nationally recognized program that we have used in Kansas ever since '93. And so the other states have tried to copy this, and we've done a nice job with measuring the accuracy of the county appraisers. And we've even had some other folks from other countries come into Kansas to take a look at the system we currently have for measuring our accuracy. So it's a very good system that we've come up with in Kansas. all legislated by those individuals that did it back in the 90s. And what does it look like? Well, it's January 1 appraisal. And we're taking a look at that, and you're going to divide that by whatever sale price in that year that you had, and that's going to be the measure. So, for instance, if we had a $100,000 house valued on January 1, we had a sale of that house in March of $100,000, that divided by the sale price is 1 or 100. So that's good. That's where you want to set, right around that 100 level. We were able to, the standard is in Kansas, we need to be 10% high or 10% low of that. So we've got 90 all the way up to 110. And we'll take a look at that here in a minute, how we're doing on those things. We got a lot of sales in our study on an annual basis, and you can kind of see for residential property here in Kansas, we're at 94.3% and 89.7% for our commercial properties. Residential and commercial, they comprise right now about 78% of the assessed value in Kansas. We'll talk more about that in a minute, but that's why we measure those two classes of property, residential and commercial classes of property. Here's some of the results of some of that. You can see residential median ratio. We need, like we said, we need to be somewhere between 90 and 110. And you can kind of see how the chart goes. We've been consistently from in above 95 to 100 through that period of time. And we kind of had a dip here recently, but you can see that the residential ratio looks really good in Kansas as a whole. And residential property is pretty easy to hit because of all the sales that we have in Kansas for those kind of properties. The coefficient of dispersion, COD, this measures the accuracy around the target. How close to the target are you, county appraisers? And so we need to see this something less than 20. And so you can see on the residential, again, we can do a pretty good job of being under that 20 threshold that we talk about. So that's important. Residential is, overall, we're doing a fine job on those particular properties. Here's our commercial median ratio, and you can see that it's in that area of around 90, but we've dipped below that, and so we're kind of consistently undervaluing our commercial properties on a statewide level. And as we kind of look at the COD, and we're not really hitting around the target, we'd like to see that under the 20% threshold there. It's not over 25, so it's doing pretty good, at least at that level, but we'd like to see that one a little better. Representative Baker and I have talked about this from time. It's really difficult, especially in our smaller communities, to figure out what that commercial property is valued at. And so that's kind of the struggle that we have with some of our commercial properties. I think it will be. We try to focus on those, but those are very difficult for the county appraisers to hit on a routine basis. The county appraiser's responsibility is to discover, to list, to value, and then to certify on or before June 1st to the county clerk their appraisal roll. Those are important parts of the whole function of the county appraiser as they begin that process out. There's a lot of tools they have that our computer-assisted mass appraisal system has been a statewide system for a long time, and that is a plus for our state. And so we use that as their tool for valuing that in the mass appraisal market. There's a lot of things that the county appraiser is responsible for doing, but I pulled out these three. Of course, again, January 1 is the appraisal date. Every year, it's a new year. Regardless of what's gone on before that, why we're going to start out brand new. What is the market value of that property January 1? And so then also the mapping system and the recorded deeds and all the deed work that was done originally. That was one of the best things that come out of the reappraisal project is the deed work and the maps that came from that. And also there are some deadlines that they have for notification of the classification and the value as well. And so those are all important parts, and many, many more as well for our professional appraisers out there. The county appraiser is appointed for a 4-year term, and that'll begin July 1, 2021, and run for the next 4 years. So this cycle is just about done, and we'll begin in the other. County commissioners will begin to hire and contract their county appraisers very, very quickly if they haven't already. And so the county appraiser has to be qualified to do that job. And so 3 years of mass appraisal experience, and we talk about 6,000 hours of experience in that mass appraisal field before they can become one. Testing is required, but I want you to, the smaller print down there, these are important designations that we require a county appraiser to have. It's either certified general real property appraiser from the Kansas Real Estate Appraisal Board. The one that we offer is the registered mass appraiser. And so we're responsible rules and regs to get them qualified under that. And then there are two from the International Association of Assessing Officers, the Residential Evaluation Specialist, and the Certified Assessment Evaluator. So those are the 4 designations that we need to have for a county appraiser to be qualified for that position. You can see kind of a comparison that we have for the qualifications for some of the things that we have in Kansas. The first one's our county appraiser with the registered mass appraisal designation. And we like to have 120 hours every 4 years for their continuing education. So that's a big part of our education program to help them along with that, their continuing ed. And of course, we have case studies and testing along with the way that we have for our county appraisers. You can kind of see how that compares to the certified residential appraiser and the certified general appraiser, both offered by the Kansas Real Estate Appraisal Board. So that's kind of how we line up with those designations as well. I think we're very, very similar in what we require our county appraisers to be. Our county appraisers are professionals. They are under the same professional standards as any appraiser that's doing any work in the state of Kansas. And so we have been emphasizing this thing for over 7 years, the importance of the standards that everybody is under. You all helped us out in 2014 to help move us toward a current version of the Uniform Standards of Professional Appraisal Practices. And so that's embedded in our statutes now, and we can continue to keep current with those because of the wording that we have in there. They're revised every 2 years. We require scope of work for our county appraisers within the documents that they provide to us. And of course, there are some very complex properties that they may feel like they're not competent to do an appraisal on. So they either have to get qualified and be competent in that, or find somebody that can do that evaluation or that appraisal on some of those rather unique properties out there. So any questions you have about the county appraiser and the professionalism that we require for those to continue to do that work? I'll stop there for a minute.
Representative Bergkamp, did you have a question?
I did. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Chairman, I should say.
Thank you.
On the residential coefficient dispersion, what led to the volatility the last 4 years from 2016 to 2019? It had been pretty steady, and then it started spiking up and down.
On the residential, maybe? Is that the one you're talking about?
Yes.
You know, I saw that, and I'm not sure I've got a good answer for that, why we jumped up and down through that area. For whatever, reason, those 2 years, we weren't as close to the target as we had been. And so I don't know what those 2 years would have represented, to be quite honest. I haven't got into the details on that. I'm sorry. I don't know the answer to that. I could probably find that out for you, though.
Yeah, if it's easy to find, that'd be good to know. If not, don't worry about it. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. We have a few more questions. Representative Baker.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for your presentation. It's excellent. and as usual, I have lots of questions, but I'll restrict to just a few. How hard is it to find appraisers?
Currently we have about 300 on our RMA eligibility list. And so, but a lot of those in our big jurisdictions, Johnson, Sedgwick, Douglas County, those big jurisdictions. It's harder to get some of those folks, you know, I hate to say it, Chairman, but it's kind of hard to get some of those folks to want to go on out to Wallace County, for instance. And so they're there. It's just a lot of them are not out in the areas where they're needed. But there should be enough county appraisers to satisfy all the needs that we have. The positions are all full right now, and I don't see any problem. We've got some new ones coming up, and we're giving about, we're continuing to work with new candidates to get their RMA. So I don't see any problem with us filling those positions for county appraisers right now. Representative Baker.
Thank you. Just a follow-up on that, and that is a question about compensation. With the requirements you have, I would have to think that the compensation is pretty substantial. And then my last question is the impact of COVID on the commercial property, what that's going to look like in the next 3 years. Thank you.
Yeah, that'll be a good one. If I can keep going, we might talk about that here in a minute. So if we can press on, we'll hit that.
Yeah, Roger, we do have a few more questions, and then we'll move on. I've got 4 in the queue. I think we'll stick with those just in the interest of time, and then we'll move on. Next, I had Representative Blacks.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for your presentation. I have a couple of questions on the computer assistant Orion system that we use to value. I get a lot of complaints about, is that fairly uniform? Because I get a lot of complaints about vacant lots. And a good example would be in an unincorporated area to where you got a vacant lot that's worth X number of dollars, and yet because of county environmental zoning, they will not allow a private septic system, which technically makes the lot worth that. Is that an issue with the county appraiser, or is there any process other than appeal to deal with that situation?
You're right. That would be on a county by county basis that they'd have to go in and visit with their county appraiser on the technicalities of whatever's going on in that specific jurisdiction. So yes, that would be a conversation with them. It's not really a problem with the system. It's more kind of a local issue, if you will. Yeah.
If you'll permit, Mr. Chair, I have one more question. We've talked about the qualifications of the appraisers. Is there a certification process for the staff that collect field data? And in reference to that, I seem to get a lot of complaints from constituents who may have an area classified as concrete, and it's not concrete. They've been paying taxes on concrete for 5 years, and there's no way of really the taxpayer knowing, because there's not a detailed statement sent as to how that partials are broken up. So what's the training for the field staff, or is that dependent on each county?
The training on field staff, they could get, we offer courses here at Property Val for those kinds of things on data collection. And so, yes, that should be fairly consistent. Now, understand that they can't go in the buildings. A lot of times they're locked up. And so I think as a property owner, they need to kind of review their records in the office and take a look and see how the county has their property listed. So that would be kind of the best way to kind of solve some of those things, make sure the property is listed correctly based on the records that the county would have. And so there's a little responsibility for our property owners as well to kind of take a look at some of that stuff also.
Representative Kelly.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Roger, a question. Over the years, there's been a number of, I guess, thoughts on the appraisal of complex property and whether it should be coming out of your office or on a county level. Anything changed on that over the years, such as the refineries and ethanol plants?
Those are all good questions. We've talked about those for quite some time. There hasn't been anything come out of your body to tell us to do those kinds of things. That right now, that's all a county assessed property. And until we kind of go the direction of allowing us to do those kinds of things, why that's going to continue to be a county assessed property by the county appraiser. So I haven't heard any more talk about officially doing making those kinds of moves toward a state assessed type property.
Representative Wassinger.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Roger, thank you for all that you're talking about. I just am wondering how difficult it is for new appraisers to try to get some experience, 6,000 hours, because from what I understand, there aren't a lot of appraisers that want to train new appraisers.
Yeah.
So when you say there are 300, I know that there were a few in Hayes that wanted to do that and were unable to get the hours. So how can we fix that? And also, how hard is it to get in the classes if you haven't gotten that experience? Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, it's not hard to get in our classes to begin that path. Most of our county appraisers are glad to mentor new folks in their office to go ahead and to begin to get that 6,000 hours experience in 3 years that they're looking at. It's 3,000 or 6,000 hours of actual valuing kinds of properties. And so they kind of have to be dedicated enough to kind of stay with it for a while in that appraiser's office to do some of those things. And it's a lot of county staff are doing it. And so it takes a while, and I understand that, but we want them to have that kind of experience that is so important for that mass appraisal system that is rather unique. So I think we're going to continue to require those kind of standards to keep the professionalism for our county appraisers.
Roger, this is Chairman Smith. I just have a quick follow-up on that. Is there any competition between the requirements for this and the private industry, private appraisers?
Any competition?
Well, I'm just curious if do we see a lot of appraisers wanting to go into business for themselves, into their own industry, rather than working for a county?
Oh, yes. It doesn't take as many hours of experience on the private side as it does on the mass appraisal side, if you'll notice. That one slide indicated that. And so, but yes, there are those individuals that will go ahead and spin off after they kind of see that this is kind of something they want to do, and they'll spin off and go into the private sector. And we also have in our mass appraisal sector some that have the general certification license as well. So we double up, and some of those individuals have been able to come over and get the experience on the mass appraisal side and be a county appraiser. So it kind of goes both ways on the certifications.
And one last question, Representative Epley. Pass. Okay, Roger, I think we'll go ahead and continue on the presentation, please.
Okay. As we talked a little bit about the property tax, that we were wondering about what's going to happen to commercial. I don't know the answer to that, but I think what we're all expecting is perhaps that we'll see a downturn in some of the values that we have in commercial properties because of what's been going on lately. Take a look at this chart and you'll see in '08 what happened in '09 and 10 after we had that slide, if you will. We probably, we can always see what happened. This is like looking in the rearview mirror. As you kind of look at the appraisal cycles, it's after the fact, and we'll probably see some kind of a dip, if you will. Here's the one that I want you to see. Look what happened through that period of time on the red line. That's our commercial properties. I don't know about you, but I would expect we're going to see something like that coming out of this particular epidemic as well. But we won't notice that probably until a couple of years down the road. To kind of see how they react to some of the sales that are going on out there. So people say, well, the county appraisers never react to what's going on. That's not true. You can see that's very clear that there was some reaction here. Commercial values did go down through that period of time. And so as you look at this particular chart, this is the 5 major classes of property that I like to look at. Residentials are blue, commercials are red, public utility is purple, green is our ag land, and the black one is our mineral leasehold or our oil and gas values. You can see also the percent of the tax base that you have over there on the far right-hand side. And I've also got probably a better one here in a minute. We'll look at that even closer. Here's what's going on statewide. We had a 3% increase from 19 to 20 statewide, and residential was up about 5% overall. Ag land was almost 2% overall statewide. Commercial was up 4%. Take a look at our commercial industrial machinery and equipment was down 11%. Ever since we've exempt that property back in 07, why we've been down about 5% a year as people replace and get rid of some property. We were down quite a bit more than that. I didn't see that coming. And of course, oil and gas values were down significantly. We lost half our value in the oil and gas patch this year. And so that's going to really hurt some of those counties. I'll show you that here in just a minute, what's going on out there. Here's kind of take a look at this one. We've got our 5 big counties laying in there. They represent over 55% of the total tax base in the state of Kansas right now. So it takes the other 100 counties to come up with the 45% left over there. And so Johnson County is getting really close to 30% of our tax base in Kansas, and they had a 6% increase. And so that's pretty significant when you think about those 5 counties and what that really means to the state of Kansas and our property tax base. Take a look at in 96, you got 38% of this tax base was residential property. Fast forward to now and look at what we've seen happen. 52% of our tax base is residential property. 26% is the commercial. And so this is a big share. Who's paying the taxes in the state of Kansas? Well, our commercial and residential property owners are typically, if you would think about it as a whole, are paying our bills. So on that part, oil and gas is a sliver compared to what it has been in past years. We'll look at that closer here in a minute. In every single, that was the statewide look, but every single county the same way is different. They're all unique, and I'm going to throw just 3 in here for sake of time, but Johnson County, one would expect residential and commercial would be the main part of their tax base. That just makes sense. As would Wallace County, that's sitting out there with about 7% of their tax base is going to be ag land. Well, that just makes sense. And Coffee County, with about 85% of their tax base, is public utility. So that's all. Every county has a rather different tax base, and so that we need to make sure we understand that very unique to every single county out there. Here's a glimpse of what's been going on in our ag land values over the past since '85. And so you can kind of see where we dipped down in 2010, and we've been going up ever since. Now we're starting to kind of level off there, if you will. And here's the oil and gas mineral leasehold. There isn't any of our subclasses that are as volatile as the oil and gas mineral leasehold valuation. It just bounces around, you can see, and we took a pretty good dip this year as well. So that was a problem for some of our counties, and we'll see that here in a minute. I just wanted to show how, as we distribute those tax funds, what's that look like? And so about 30% of that's going to our counties, over 16% to our cities. We've got the school, and that's the 20 mills for our schools. They're about almost 14, 15%. And then the school other, that's the LOB, the bond and interest, the capital outlays, all those funds then making up about 24%. Community college, and you can kind of see where they all lie in there. So the counties would be the big one, and the schools is the other big one as well. Maybe kind of looking at that in a closer look at what the numbers look like. Our K-12, our 20 mills, that represents right now, we're looking at 742 million statewide. That is a statewide levy. So everybody's paying that 20 mills. It comes to into the state and then goes back on out to the school districts needing that. The 1.5 mil that I talked about originally, well, that's for our educational building fund and our state institutional building fund, $0.5 mil for that. So you can see right now we're currently right around the $59 million mark for that 1.5 mil for those two building funds. Roughly 32 mills is what we kind of estimate every year for our K-12 that's not in that 20 mills. And so those are, again, the LOB, bond and interest, and our capital outlay, and the other funds that's in that. We do have the residential exemption that we started in 1997, and so that represents, we're exempting 46 million, and that's for the first 20,000 of appraised value. Times, of course, 11.5%, and the 20 mils represents that $46. So that makes sense because remember I said we had about a little over 1 million parcels of residential property. So that lines up real fine. We do not collect the 20 mils for school for motor vehicles. That's left out of the county motor vehicle levy. And so right now we're exempting, if you will, about 75 million for schools, with not including that in our motor vehicle levy. And so but the all others funds that we collect, that represents coming off of the motor vehicles, 159 million for our schools in that part of it. And so we were really busy back in the early 90s, and I kind of wanted to share this with you just to refresh our memory about the levies that we had for schools. Before 92, it was set by the local units, the local school districts. And so we had a very broad range of levies out there. And so they said, hey, let's figure this thing out. So the state set the levies, and you can see where we've gone historically through the time period. And in 96, we stuck on 20 mils, and we've been there ever since. And so that kind of shows you kind of what our history has been since that period of time. 97, of course, that's first year of the residential exemption for the school levy as well. Take a look at kind of real quick. We're going to see a couple of examples of the distribution out there, what it might look like. So here's Greeley County, and so their tax per capita. And here we got 1,200 folks in the county, and they're levied over 7 million, and so that's a burden. Or I don't care where you're at. That's pretty tough. This is the unified government at Greeley, and the other unified government, of course, Wyandotte. And so you've got these two counties that have a unified government system out there. 66 67% of their taxes are going to the county as the unified government there in Tribune. Also, for instance, here's you got well over 100,000 folks in Douglas County, and so their per capita is certainly a lot less. And you kind of see how that looks. The county is only 33% in this particular instance, and you kind of see where things are lining up here. About 41% for the schools out of Douglas County. How do we set this levy, if you will? I just want to refresh your memory about how this works. You're going to be talking about Senate Bill 13 here, I think next week perhaps. And as we think about that, we're going to take the amount of tax that needs to be levied divided by the tax district's assessed value to figure that out. Make sure we understand that we're going to look at all revenue sources for the budget first. So whatever grants, whatever money that is coming into that from sales tax, whatever that might look like, we're going to do that first. And then whatever's left over, that's what we're going to levy the tax for. And so this example, then, the county budget, we've got 3.8 million that we're going to divide by this 100,500,000. So we're going to get a tax rate of 0.037811. So we know that to be 37 mills is how we're going to do it. Move that decimal place 3 places to the right, and that's the mill levy that we have there. In Kansas, that's kind of how we express it. And so that's kind of how we come up with the levy, if you will. And when we're talking about tax, calculating our tax for anything, I'm going to use the example of a $100,000 residential property. So the subclass is 11.5%. So 11,500 is our taxable value. I'm going to use 151.089 mills for this particular thing. And you kind of see the math there. So that particular $100,000 house with this 151 mills is 1737.52. Then we have to apply the residential exemption. Everybody gets that $46 off their tax bill. And so there you can see the total tax for this particular residence is $1691.52. So that's kind of how we come up with those kind of things. Now, I want to share this with you and spend a little time here as you kind of think about your Senate Bill 13 next week. Taxes are budget driven. There is a direct relationship between the budget and the tax. And you can see that from the arrows on my chart. The arrows for budget line and the tax line are identical. So as we think about this, if the value is the same and the budget goes up, the levy has to go up and the tax goes up. And so value and the levy are just mathematical parts of the equation as you kind of get to what that tax looks like. Row 2, we're going to see the value going up. The budget stays the same. The levy is going to go down for a tax that's the same. And then row 3, I'm going to come back to this one here in a minute. Value goes down, budget stays the same, levy goes up, tax stays the same. And if we have a value staying the same with the budget going down, and with the levy will have to go down, and so the tax goes down. So those are kind of the way the budget works, if you will, as you think about how we go here. We'll take a look at this. This is in a perfect world. This is how it would look. Of course, Kansas is not necessarily a perfect world. We'll see that here in a minute. I've got a list of 45 counties that had a decrease in value, and some substantially this year because of what went on in the oil and gas patch out there. And so you can see some of the counties that got hit pretty hard: Stevens, Haskell, Morton, Ernie, Grant. So obviously Southwest Kansas and our gas, you get in gas food. And so Barber's a big oil mess, Harper, Russell, you can tell what's going on there. And so again, here's some more of the ones. So we got 45 of these counties that are going that direction. And so going back here to this one, here, stay on row 3 with me for just a minute as I think about this. We're going to assume that if, in fact, values go up and budget stays the same, and the levy would have to go up and the tax would be the same. But I'm telling you, that's the perfect world. Let's assume that in Stevens County, we know exactly what went on there. The oil and gas mineral leasehold subclass went down. So did their ag land went down. Let's assume commercial stays the same and residential goes up on that. So what's going to happen in the reality of the taxpayer in Stevens County? Well, if you are a commercial property owner, your tax is going to go up. If you're a residential property owner, your tax is going to go up as well. So just because we say that a budget doesn't go up doesn't necessarily mean the tax is going to stay the same in cases where you've got a couple of subclasses or one or more subclasses that take a drastic dip down. Why there's going to be other subclasses are going to have to pick that up. You and I know from years of experience that those taxes just shift around to whoever's left. And so that's the same way on that kind of a thing. And so we'll take some questions on that here in a little bit, but let me go on just a couple more and we'll be done. Here's our levies in Kansas, and the red line represents the statewide average levy. So that's statewide, and so that's weighted basically by the value and the taxes levied. And so our big counties are going to be the big impact on that one. The blue line is going to be those counties that have a county that has the highest levy, and the green line is the county with the lowest levy. So Coffee County has been the lowest levy for a long time. And so we know that there are 82 counties that were between this red line and the blue line. And so that's where most of our counties are lying. Most of those are rural counties out there. And so that's where they're going to be most of the time. And here's an example of what we've seen over the past few years anyway, who's had the highest levy out there. Smith and Clark has come in there recently to be the highest levy in the state of Kansas as a county average levy. And so what I want to turn our attention to the effective tax rate, because that's the more meaningful thing. And I think that's the important part for us to kind of think about. In Kansas, with the statewide average levy sitting there at 134 mills, why our effective tax rate is 1.5. To calculate that, anybody can calculate that on your own property. Take your assessment rate, 11.5% for residential, times your levy, your own levy, and you can determine what your effective tax rate would look like. And so in this case, for a $100,000 market value property, why we're going to be paying $1,543 for a residential property at that effective tax rate. And so commercial is 3.3 and the public utility is 4.4. So that's getting pretty high when you get into that area. And so ag land is going to be 0.35 because of the way they're particularly valued. So that kind of gives you an idea of what that effective tax rate is. I don't have them on my slide presentation, but on your PDF that I provided you, there are 3 sheets that I put together that has the effective tax rate for all the counties in Kansas. And what you'll notice is you do you have those in front of you? I'll stop and ask that question. Is that?
Yes, Roger, those were included in the PDF, so we should have them in front of us.
I don't have mine in front of me, so I'll maybe have to rely on you a little bit. But you can see over on, I arrayed them by the residential effective tax rate, I think, as I came down through there. And so I think Lane County, if I recall right, was the highest. And what I've noticed, and maybe you all have heard from some of your constituents as well, but when you get a commercial effective tax rate that's setting 5% or higher, uh, that is a significant load for our taxpayers. And you can see we've got several counties that are 5% or better. And when you've got a tax rate, an effective tax rate on residential property that's 2.3% or higher, that's a pretty big load. And so you can see some of the counties that would have that as well. And so I did go all the way to 2% just on our residential to kind of give you an idea, but that covers a lot of counties that has an effective tax rate for residential property that's 2% or more. So that kind of tells us the story about what's going on in some of our communities out there and the load that they're paying for property tax right now. So I'll stop there and see if you have any questions concerning some of that information as well. Kind of concludes the comments that I had. I'd be glad to take some questions.
Thank you very much, Roger. First question will be Representative Gartner.
Hi, Roger. Thanks for the presentation. That's somewhat depressing, to say the least. Okay, how do we fix this? I mean, it's just depressing to look at the mill levies out in some of these counties that are over 200. The effective tax rate in some of these counties are too high. So where do we go? What do we do?
That is a great question. How do we help our counties out in some of these areas? We've loaded them up with a lot of responsibilities, and a lot of times they're doing the best they can. There's maybe ways to conserve. I'm not sure what that looks like. Remember, we used to have city and county revenue sharing. We had several different tools to provide them with some extra revenue so that they could lower their levies. They don't have any of that anymore, and so they're kind of on their own. We've got counties out there that are some cities that have levies over 300 mills. I didn't put them down, but there's cities with over 300 mills out there. That's a struggle, and so I don't know how to help them. They've called up and said, "What do we do?" And I said, I don't know. I don't have any good answers for you. But we've got to get some revenue out to them somehow to help them out. That's what I think.
Mr. Chairman, just to follow up, I agree, Roger. Unless you have a Wolf Creek in every county, that's not going to happen. But what if, there was some discussion last year on LATVR, I think I'm saying this correctly, but we wanted to allocate $54 million, if I remember correctly, back to the counties. And I think I asked you this question last year. Would it, if you could take that $54 million and prioritize that $54 million to the highest mill levies, would that be somewhat of an assistance to those counties?
Yes, I think it would. We have talked about maybe more of a targeted local ad valorem tax relief fund going back out to some of those counties. Targeted ones to those counties with the higher levies would make sense to me. We've never been able to figure out how to do that, though. But yes, those kind of, but it's 54 million, that sounds like a big number to me. But when you begin to split it up out there, that really, that doesn't lower the levies very much unless you really target that to some of the counties that need the most help. That's what I've seen anyway.
Thank you, Representative Gardner. With a little bit of county government experience myself, I know those small counties out in western Kansas and rural areas, they're pretty creative. They consolidate where they can. In my county, we consolidate our city and county law enforcement. We have several tax districts that are consolidated with other counties as well. They are trying to do the best that they can with what they've got and trying to recognize the tax burden on their citizens. I have Representative Corbett next.
Thank you. One of the questions I'd like to have seen maybe in your slides would be kind of how the population moves along with the years and the taxes. It also seems to me that with Kansas having ranks pretty high for outward migration, I think people are solving some of these own problems. They're just leaving. And that's the sad part about this whole thing. This committee in this state really can't seem to come up with a reason to keep retirees here, families here, or start businesses here. Because just like in my district, whether it's Osage City or Burlingame on Main Street, 25% for commercial taxes, just like on Wanamaker or down in Kansas City. And they just can't operate under this kind of a burden. And I don't think you can spend yourself out of this problem. You just got to kind of stop spending. The population's leaving, you got less people, and you're spending more money. So that's the solution, I think, is just trying to give them some incentive to stay here. Thanks.
Representative Wassinger.
I have to agree with Representative Corbett. Paying these counties to refund some of the mill levy for a year is not going to change the mill levy. I mean, it's just not going to do it. And we are losing, I know in particular in Ellis County, we're losing the retirees. They're moving out of state to go with their kids. So we're losing a tremendous amount of local wealth, and it's gone. It's gone from Kansas. It's gone from our tax rolls. We're not keeping people here. We have to look at a more basic reason to keep people in Kansas and show them why it's valuable to be here. And that's the key. It's not giving a tax rebate to people with high mill levies. But now, just to toot my own county's horn, I would like everyone to look at the very bottom of the list of mill levies. Notice that's Ellis County, which is what I represent. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Representative Wassinger. Roger, along that note, and perhaps this would be something for research to do, do we have a comparison of our neighboring states, looking back at slide number 42, where we show the statewide average, high county and low county? It'd be interesting to see where we compare to states like Nebraska, Missouri, Oklahoma. I don't know if I want to say Colorado or not, but it'd just be interesting to see how we do compare with some of our regional partners.
I did have that slide in there and took it out. We do pretty good around us, keeping up with Nebraska and Missouri. We don't in Oklahoma, but then you might take a look at their roads. And we can't keep up with Colorado either. So, and it might be that we need to look into that alternative crop out there. I don't know. But anyway, those two states we're behind quite a bit, but Nebraska and Iowa and Missouri, we're pretty much in line with them as far as our average effective tax rate in Kansas. Yeah. I should have put that one in and I didn't.
Thank you, Roger. Committee, any further questions? Representative Helgerson.
Not a question, but a comment. And historically, we have taken additional funds, whether or not it's through the Appropriation Committee or through the Tax Committee, and decided that a priority would be to lower tax rates in a particular group, property tax or car taxes, and said that is a priority for the legislature to do. And That's passed previously. It's that we don't have a clear vision about what we want and what's necessary in this state to do. Use the example of the $70 or $80 million of the two taxes the governor's proposing. The governor proposes to use that for spending. Well, you could make a case that that $80 million goes for property tax reduction for residential and say, we're going to make an effort for 3 years and we're going to bring down all these taxes. If this committee and the legislature decides that's a priority. Or we're going to spend it for economic development programs, for, you know, whatever, for rural Kansas or for trying to grow our businesses. But that's at the heart of whether we want, how we want to deal with these funds.
Thank you, Representative. Representative Highland.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I get complaints about the commercial property tax. And the question is, do we have commercial property appraisers in the state? Do we have a backup system where all the appraisers across the state can go and look at these appraisals of commercial property so they can compare by region and whatever? Or do we have to hire commercial appraisers?
Within the county is what you're asking?
Yes.
Yeah. Our counties do have a good staff of commercial appraisers. Certainly in our big jurisdictions is a good example of those individuals. And even in our smaller jurisdictions, they are competent to do the appraisals of the commercial property. Are you concerned about how we measure them or their accuracy, or what is it that's the concern?
Well, I'm hearing that from appraisers themselves from across the state that they do not have clear guidance on commercial properties. They don't have a system where they can go in and check what the rates might be for properties or similar properties across the state or regions. We understand that in some regions they're not going to be worth near as much as they are in other regions, but there is no system that the appraisers can go in and look at, so they're left hanging out there and they say, well, we have to hire a commercial appraiser to come in and do that. And that's what I'm hearing out there.
Okay. We certainly have a database of commercial sales that our county appraisers have access to. So I think we have the tools. Maybe we don't have, maybe we're not using the tools that we have efficiently. I don't know. We'll have to look into that a bit. Yeah.
Representative Baker.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So part of the problem on commercial property is there's so few sales in the rural areas, it's impossible to get a market value. The whole concept of property tax, it's 100 years old and it's obsolete and it probably needs to be looked at. But I sat on an interim committee this summer on government security and technology, and these comparisons by state is what I asked for from the different presenters. And I will tell you the quality of life we have in Kansas comes with a cost, but we have a lot lower crime rates. We have a lot lower drug rates. We have a higher standard of living in Kansas than some of our states surrounding. So when you compare us, you got to remember a lot of the things we have from government services, they come at a cost. And it's a matter of, you know, if you want to cut all these taxes, that's fine, but you might want to buy a little better computer security system because it's going to be hacked. So thank you.
Representative Epley.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. So just kind of build on some of the commercial, I'll just pile on that same pile and tell you that, as an example, we have two buildings that have recently, the businesses have closed down, they've left, and their appraised value for their property tax for someone to purchase them is based upon their use from when they were viable businesses, which they left. They're not viable. And the property tax mountain or burden it's impossible for anybody to purchase them, so these buildings just remain vacant into perpetuity. And I don't know how that's addressed via, I guess I don't have full insight as to how you get the appraiser locally to lower the appraised value, because those are not functioning at the level they were, and yet they're appraised at when they were, in this example, a supermarket or a Walmart. And when those relocate and they're gone, they're gone, and there's just not that same tax base. So I'm just letting David understand that's a real issue, I think, not only in Northeast Kansas, but throughout the state, because there's a lot of vacant buildings, unfortunately, these days. So thank you.
Thank you. Committee, any further questions? I'm not seeing any online unless Representative Highland has his hand up still. So. See no further questions. David, Roger, thank you very much for your very informative presentation. It's going to be proven very useful to us as we do start taking a look at some of our property tax bills that are coming before the committee. As you mentioned, first of all, next week, Senate Bill 13, which will be taking a look at some property tax transparency and valuations. Is there anything else that needs to come before the committee? Committee, thank you very much for your patience and a little bit longer meeting today. There is no tax committee meeting tomorrow. We will meet again on Monday. We will have a hearing on a couple of bills then. We'll see you all.